Fireworks on the beach in Santa Monica, and she was in my arms. Deborah. She'd been my girl since 7th grade, and that day she turned 17, because the 4th of July was her birthday too. And man, that day had a habit of blowing up. Deborah always wanted to celebrate her own independence, you know what I mean? That's why I called her my firecracker. That night we were just sitting on the sand, getting loaded with the rest of LA. The lights in the sky going pop, pop, pop. The thing about fireworks is you know what's going to happen. You know there's going to be the boom and the flash and the crackle. And it's still beautiful, you know? You can still be surprised. We went back to Culver City to keep the party going. Pretty soon Deborah wanted to walk me to her mother's house because I was too messed up. We only made it 2 blocks when this car rolls up. Deborah saw what I didn't. She just kept walking and said, "Don't say nothing." A guy in the car asked us, "De donde? De donde? Where you from?" If I could have done things differently, I would have stayed on the beach till dawn, but that's not how life goes. Before we could answer, pop, pop, pop. Deborah's face was covered in blood. Her beige trench coat, the chola uniform, it was covered in blood. And then I don't remember because they got me too. They shot me for being born in a different neighborhood. I woke up in the hospital and Deborah was in the bed next to me. My homegirl, my best friend, my backup. The machines were beeping and the two of us held together with gauze and tape. We wouldn't get married for another 5 years. But after that day, I called her my wife. Our wounds healed and we had a daughter, Erin. But I didn't grow up. Those days I was always running around on Deborah. But my firecracker, she would blow up at me because I didn't know how good I had it. But then life caught up with me, or it slipped out of my grasp. All I know is I was 21 and I didn't know how to deal with what was coming my way. It all started when I got shot again. Man, it wasn't even a gangbanger. It was just some security guard. Shot me for mouthing off to him in the parking lot of the projects. He said it was an accident. Right. They told me I'd never walk again, that I might not be able to do other things men do. That wasn't going to work for me, and that wasn't going to work for Deborah either. She was just over 5 feet tall, but she carried the weight of me, got me from a wheelchair to crutches to walking on my own 2 feet. It took 5 months of trying every single day. Then one night we were up in our apartment, and Deborah was taking out the trash. Erin was sleeping in her crib. I was about to open a beer when I hear Deborah scream. I grab a knife, and when I get outside, Deborah's on the ground. The guy who beat up on her was walking away. I'd only been on my feet for 2 weeks, and I couldn't hardly walk, but I wasn't going to let him hurt her and get away with it. See, that's the way we handle things. If I'd known that particular act of violence would be the one to change everything, I would have just taken Deborah back upstairs. But I didn't know. I didn't even think. Manslaughter got me sent to jail for 3 years. When I got out, Deborah wasn't my girl anymore. She'd gotten together with my best friend. Back then, I didn't know how to think about someone other than myself, about all the ways I'd hurt Deborah. All I could think was that I'd been in prison for her. I'd stabbed a guy for her, and I couldn't handle losing her, losing our family. So I disappeared into drugs. I mean, I disappeared. And so did Deborah. She started shooting heroin, and I spent all my time with my homies, drinking and taking pills. I went into a fog, and I did things I can't take back. The reality of that world is we were all hurting each other. We were all living without thinking, and I took part in all of it. I marched into that fog, and when I got out, I'd been convicted of murder and sentenced to life. But Deborah and I couldn't lose each other. We had our ups and downs, and it took years, but we finally got to a good place. Even though I was in prison and she wasn't my wife anymore, we developed a better relationship than we'd ever had when we were together. It only took me like 40 years, but I was starting to grow. Sometimes that's how life works. I'd been locked up for 17 years and off drugs for 13. And that June, my daughter sent me a photo of her and Deborah. I remember getting that letter and pulling out the picture and smiling. There aren't many smiles in prison. You get a few laughs, but very few smiles. And when I saw that picture, I thought, this is what I've wanted all along. Deborah had been clean for a year. She had a job and an apartment, and she was about to buy a car. I remember she was so damn excited for that car. It was going to be the last piece of the puzzle. I was so proud of her, of my family. And then the 4th of July came along, her birthday. There aren't any fireworks in prison, but I thought of Deborah as she turned 43. A few days later, I called my parents, and my brother told me what happened. Deborah had gone out on her birthday. She'd shot up, and her arm developed an abscess. She got an infection, and 3 days later she died. When I'd gotten shot, Deborah was there for me. She nursed me back to health, made me whole again. And when she needed me, those two kids sitting on the beach, watching the fireworks, being in love, they had no idea what life had in store. All that love and all that pain. But it's still beautiful. 13 years after Deborah died, I got out of prison. Now I help others become whole like me, like she helped me. I help people who are homeless find homes. And when the 4th of July comes along, I see Deborah in the sky because I'm alive.